I came across an interesting or rather scary stat today actually, where the WHO has now stated that suicide rates supersede the COVID-19 deaths, and it's very much related to the pandemic and obviously the consequences of dealing with lockdown and the stresses that we're all going through at the moment. Having looked at those stats, I thought, well, let me look at what's happening in the South African context. And I came across an article on News 24, it was posted on the 8th of June, where SADC had mentioned that the amount of people calling their call centres has doubled over this lockdown period. SADC being the South African and Depression Group or Association of South Africa. And what they did mention in this article is that people are phoning in obviously with really struggling with depression and considering suicide, and obviously their call centre people having to talk them through this. And what was mentioned is just the economic impact on families, and also people just being put into lockdown restrictions where they're in confined spaces in not ideal family circumstances. Obviously not all families' dynamics are healthy. So there could be an abuse scenario, there could be domestic violence, sort of substance abuse, etc. And people are really, really struggling. So I felt to talk about depression because I do think in this day and age it is still widely stigmatized. People don't realize that it is a disease and that it can be treated, and that just because you're going through depression doesn't mean you are weak. And I also wanted to share with you some of the symptoms to look out for should you be going through depression or someone close to you, so that you can seek help and get treatment, because it is treatable and you are able to find a light at the end of the tunnel. So just in terms of the symptoms to look out for with regards to depression, physicians and psychiatrists use something called the DSM-5 criteria. So in terms of those diagnostic criteria for depression, I'm just going to give you a list of some of the symptoms to look out for. So before I get there, depression is often used quite loosely as a term. I know just my girlfriends and I will catch up for coffee or whatever, and one of us will say, oh, I felt so depressed today. And what we meant was we just had an off day, felt a bit sad, but the day after or the next day we were back to normal. That is not depression at all. Clinical depression or major depression is literally symptoms that last for 2 consecutive weeks or longer. The 2 main symptoms to look out for is a continuous depressed mood for 2 weeks or longer, and then also just a loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you would normally otherwise have enjoyed. For example, let's say you were always a very sociable person suddenly, and that made you happy to do. Suddenly now that's the last thing you want to do, and in fact it doesn't bring any pleasure or joy to you at all. That's just an example. There are other symptoms to look out for. Those are the 2 main ones. The other symptoms can include significant weight loss without trying to diet or actually purposely lose weight, or weight gain, because there are appetite changes that happen if you are depressed. The other symptom is a slowing down of your thought processes, and even just a slowing down of your body. So your energy levels also become quite flat, and people around you will normally notice that your energy levels are just not where they used to be, and you may feel it as well. There are often sleep disruptions as well. You either would want to sleep more or are sleeping more, or you may be suffering from insomnia, and again that relates to your energy levels very low, lots of fatigue, and just not functioning optimally as you would have previously functioned. The other aspect associated with depression is excessive negative thoughts, feelings of worthlessness, and also just inappropriate guilt. Like there's no reason for you to be feeling guilty, but you're literally dumping this guilt on yourself. And often what happens is the more lethargic you get, the more you're suffering from fatigue, the more these negative thoughts and feelings of worthlessness come. The other aspect to be very aware of, and kind of what I've highlighted at the beginning of this video, is suicidal ideation. Obviously ideation means idea, so thoughts of suicide and or trying to commit suicide. If you have had those thoughts or have even attempted committing suicide, you really, really need to seek help. There is help out there, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, like I said. So before I get into the biology or the science behind what happens in your brain when you're depressed, I thought I'd quickly just share with you that I actually had postnatal depression myself. And it was a good 11 years ago. My youngest son is now turning 11 in August. And I remember at the time, though, thinking, if I just get some sleep, I'll be fine. I was in complete denial about having depression. It took me going to a GP who gave me a tick list and said, go home, go through this list. If these symptoms witness with you, basically, come back and we'll discuss some medication. And literally on the way home, when I was reading the list, I was like, oh my word, this is me. I need to go and get some help. Also during that time, close family members told me, just snap out of it. And I remember thinking, if only I could just snap out of it. I just want to snap out of this. And what I realized subsequently is telling someone who's going through clinical depression to just snap out of it is like telling anyone with any disease to just snap out of it, especially if you look at the science behind it. And there definitely is science behind depression. It's not just something that you can snap out of. So let's go into the science a bit. It is a complex disease. Yes, there are chemical imbalances involved. And scientists have actually shown that people that are depressed battle to produce new nerve cells, or a process called neurogenesis. So there is an issue with their brain circuitry, essentially. What they've also shown is that certain areas of the brain actually are smaller than people who don't have depression. So for example, the hippocampus in one of the studies showed in women with depression that it was a lot smaller, which is obviously significant in terms of explaining that there is actually a physiological thing that is happening when you are going through depression. There's also been a lot of research done in terms of the chemicals involved in causing depression and the related symptoms. And antidepressants have actually been formulated to increase those levels of chemicals. So three of the main ones that are associated with depression is serotonin, dopamine and noradrenaline. And a lot of the medications you'll get on the market actually help to increase the levels of those neurotransmitters or chemicals in the brain. If you have to look at how nerves communicate, or neurons, nerve cells communicate with each other in the brain, it is via chemicals. And the reason why they have to do that is because nerve cells actually aren't physically touching each other. So in order for one nerve cell to talk to another nerve cell, they have to transfer chemicals across a gap called a synapse. And when those chemicals are lacking or low, that's when there is a disruption in the pathway or the communication amongst or between the neurons. And that can cause the typical symptoms of depression related to sleep, appetite, energy, motivation, brain functioning, memory, etc. So what I just want to encourage you, if you are struggling with any of the symptoms I mentioned with regards to depression, please go and seek help, because A, there is medication available, and B, there is also support available. There is someone you can talk to, and no, you're not mad, and no, you can't just snap out of it, and yes, you can get help. In the description box below, I'll give you some details with regards to the SADAC website, the South African Association of Depression and Anxiety. And there is also a call center number on that website as well. And again, if you are suffering with any of these symptoms, please go see your GP and or a psychiatrist. It really is worth it, and you'll see your whole life do an about turn for the positive. Having experienced it myself, I can honestly bear witness to the fact that had I not gone on antidepressants, had I not gone for counseling, I did some spiritual healing as well, I don't think I would be in the space that I am now, which is actually better than I was before I actually suffered from depression. So I'm grateful for the experience, and I'm grateful that I can hopefully help you in some way.